way north of Boston in a town called Haverhill, or as we like to call it, Haverhill.
Gonzo, the Coast Guard Years, Boston, Episode 9, Scuba Diving and Tequila with Enchiladas.
Well, crap. It was all but official. I was going to the Coast Guard cutter Tahoma, or as we would call it, the Never Homa. But I had a ways to go before I would be going there. I still had to finish NAVMAC school, and by finish, I mean actually go to NAVMAC school. As it turns out, I was going to have to wait at least 3 months before I was able to go. The next class, well, the one that I missed, was 3 months long, so it would be 3 more months before I would get to go. So I was in no hurry to go to a big white one, so that was cool. 3 months, maybe longer, that would be sweet. It was also during this time we had gotten a few more people that arrived at EMD. And also during this time, I had moved with Keith and John off base to an apartment way north of Boston in a town called Haverhill, or as we like to call it, Haverhill. Honestly, I don't know why we bitched so much about it. It was really a nice, quiet town. The only drawback was that it was a shitty-ass commute back and forth from Boston to Haverhill. I'm not even sure exactly how I ended up moving with John and Keith. I mean, there's a story there somewhere, and if I remember it, I'll get to it. But we also had gotten, like I said, a few new guys at EMD. One in particular was this good old boy from Wilmington, North Carolina. Or at least I think that was the area he was from. You know, it might have been Swansboro, North Carolina, but whatever. This good old boy was this tall, red-headed dude by the name of Frankie. Now, just for clarity's sake, Frankie no longer goes by Frankie. He now just goes by Frank. Not even sure. Anyway, there's a whole long story about that. Frankie looked like your typical red-headed dude, or the one you would expect, like bright red hair and super pale skin, and he had some freckles too. He was likely to burn. I mean, the dude was so pale that if he stood too long underneath the overhead lights, he'd get a sunburn. But Frankie was a really, really great guy, and he was an absolute riot too. Frankie was also prior Coast Guard. By that, I mean he was previously in the Coast Guard. He'd got out and boomeranged his way back into the Coast Guard. The whole idea about leaving and coming back was completely foreign to me. I had no idea that was a thing. You know, everyone has different experiences when they get out of the Coast Guard. And, you know, I guess, you know, he decided life was better in the Coast Guard. Anyway, Frankie also had these really funny Southern sayings. And my favorite one, and by favorite, it's really because the only one I remember that he said, which makes sense because it's my favorite. In addition to being funny as hell, Frankie had this kicking or pretty thick Southern accent on top of all of it. So when he said something, it just sounded funnier. Not to say that Southern people are funny, but Frank was. He was also a big scuba diver, so much that he was actually a scuba instructor. And he was a bit of an entrepreneur. So he combined that with the fresh coastie meat that was around him and started figuring out a way to make a bit of money. A handful of us took lessons from Frankie. We all bought all kinds of stuff like scuba masks, snorkels, fins. I even bought one of those super thin skin suits. Actually, they call them like dive skins. It was this, basically it was a wetsuit made from super thin material. And but you could use it on its own, but you usually used it underneath a regular swimsuit. But if you didn't want to wear a swimsuit, though, it was great to keep you from, getting abrasions against rocks and, other underwater debris. While it was cool to have, unless you had an elite athlete physique or something like that, that damn thing was so form-fitting that your love handles and fat rolls were out for the whole world to see. Thankfully, I was still pretty lean back then, and I didn't look like a poorly packaged sausage link bursting at the seams. Speaking of sausage, when you wore that thing like your beans and Franks, and no pun intended, sorry, Frank, but your junk was pretty much on display for everyone to see when you had that dive skin on. Frankie and I would end up going on a few scuba diving adventures. There were a few times that my ears were, I couldn't clear them. So they're always stuffed up. And as you're going deeper, you need to be able to equalize the pressure in your head so your brain didn't blow up. I always had sinus problems, so clearing my ears was always a difficult thing to do, but I always managed to get it done one way or the other. And while sometimes it was a little uncomfortable, you could never, the experience was so amazing because, the first time that you're underwater and breathing, you got the mask and you got this regulator in your mouth. It was really a super cool experience. Sadly, after I left EMD and Frankie left EMD, we lost touch, and it was like a decades later before we actually caught up, because back then, no one had cell phones. We didn't have email. Maybe there was email, but we didn't fucking have email. But anyway, as I said, Frank, he had this saying that I really loved. Like most of us, if Frankie told stories, and they were always pretty funny, if he was in the middle of a story and you or me, for whatever reason, decided to butt in or add to the story Frankie was telling, Frankie would very graciously pause his story, look over at you with this sarcastic smile or grin on his face, and he'd say, "Boy, I'm fucking this dog. You just hold his head." I know exactly what you're thinking, because the first time you hear him say it, it's a bit shocking. It's not like something you would ever hear in normal, polite conversation. But holy shit, where the hell did he come up with that stuff? And what the actual fuck does that mean? Before I go any further, I'll just let all that sink in just a moment. Go ahead. I'll wait. Frankie and I would head out on numerous road trips together. Mostly they were long-ass drives from Boston down to his home in North Carolina. I had met his family. We'd gone scuba diving a few times, and it seemed like Frankie had family all over the place. One year we headed down to Topsail Island and stayed in this small motel there. Had dinner at a small restaurant, only a short walk from the motel. And you're thinking, so what? Well, the so what is that his family, Frankie's, owned both places. So the treatment was good and everyone was friendly. At least they were friendly to me. Eventually, with a lot of Frankie's help, I became an advanced open water diver, which in the grand scheme of things is way down the list from being an instructor or a dive master. But I wasn't exactly at the bottom. Close, but not at the bottom. At one point, Frankie had taken off leave. I don't remember if it was 1 or 2 weeks, but he had left the keys to his truck. He left them with me. Really? I'm like, that's way cool, dude. Of course, I had no intention of ever driving this truck until, while Frankie was away, it was about the time that I was moving off base. I was moving in with Keith and John, as I had mentioned earlier, in the lovely little town of Haverhill. It was only a 2-bedroom apartment. Honestly, I couldn't remember, but I think I slept on the couch for a while. But anyway, maybe it was Keith. I don't remember. But I wasn't there for very long before I headed off to my next school, which ended up being NavMax. So basically, yeah, anyway, so don't worry about the timeline. It'll make sense at some point, maybe. Although John had moved out and I was taking the spare bedroom, and my timeline is really messed up. So forgive me. But I didn't have a bed. We did, and by we, I mean Keith and I ended up going to one of these discount mattress places, but I needed a way to move it. So I had Frankie's truck so I decided to borrow it. Keith, being as cool as he was, decided to come with me. He even wanted to drive too, which I don't know why, but sure, why not? I was happy enough to let him drive. I ended up with this beat-up old mattress and box spring and a tiny little bed frame. It didn't have a headboard or anything like that, but I ended up pushing the bed up against the wall, so I really didn't need a headboard. You know, as a matter of fact, that mattress, I think it was one of those that another warehouse had caught on fire, so it had smoke damage at one point, but it was pretty well aired out, so I didn't smell anything, but that's why it was on a discount, because it came from some other damaged factory type thing. On the way back from the mattress store, which, mind you, we were there late in the evening, because, you know, that's when people go to the mattress stores, in the evening. As Keith is driving, people would pull up alongside us and tell him that the taillights were out. All I know about that wasn't a big deal. We managed to get back to Haverhill without incident, except, you know, we had the little flashy lights going the whole time with the car or the truck. Unloaded the mattress and frame and whatnot and got it all set up, except I didn't have any bed sheets, which is okay because Keith loaned me some sheets that he had borrowed from the Coast Guard base, so it's all good. And I don't think I ever actually gave those sheets back. I don't think I had a pillow either, but that wasn't so bad. I just rolled up some clothes, shoved them into something, I don't know what, and used that as a pillow. I think I eventually got a pillow, but I'm not even entirely sure what happened with that pillow. I lost it somewhere along the way. I lost a lot of shit while I was in the Coast Guard. Before I forget, like I always seem to do, you're probably wondering why the taillights were out in Frankie's truck. Apparently, he had a lot of sand and debris that had flown up underneath the bed of the truck. And it had corroded a bunch of the wires and whatnot. So I felt bad that the lights were fucked up, so I decided to fix them. In doing so, I ended up breaking off this clip that kept the rear license plate lights in place. Now, I managed to fix the lights. All I had to do was strip back some wires and reconnect them, easy peasy. And I had wedged the lights back into place well enough that Frankie wouldn't notice. And of course, because the universe hates me, the license plate light thingy, doohickey thing, it fell off. As you imagine, Frankie noticed. He took the whole thing really well, in fact. He wasn't the type that get all worked up about something. I mean, he's just like, oh, well, shit happens, and whoops. And he was cool. So anyway, back to the apartment. I have a few memories from that old apartment, and obviously none of them are in any particular order because, my timeline's all screwed up. Aside from the fact that we had a 40-minute-ish drive each day back and forth from the Coast Guard base, one of those memories involved enchiladas and tequila shots. In the apartment, Keith and I would take turns making dinner. Keith's favorite thing to cook, and probably the only thing he knew how to cook, was tuna noodle casserole. Yeah. It might have been, the only thing he knew how to cook. I mean, he could boil water, I think barely, but tuna noodle casserole, which, by the way, isn't casserole at all, but whatever, it was good. Every time, though, we would go to the grocery store down the street, and if the cashier was a cute female, Keith would have to go through this whole thing and kept announcing that we're just two bachelors buying food in our bachelor pad. It was just this fucking pathetic thing he would always say, and it was funny too. At least it was embarrassing, but it was funny to me. And he always used to do it. And as a matter of fact, he hit on every cute cashier that he ever came across. There was one at the local gas station, which was somewhere between the grocery store and our apartment. He did it all the time. As a matter of fact, Keith would make up reasons or excuses to go to the gas station because I had one of those little mini marts in it. And he always struck out, though, when he went there. But I have to admit, I did admire his persistence. And I mean, when he made up excuses, he'd be chilling in the apartment. He's like, yo, Gonzo, you need some cigarettes? I can run up to the gas station and get some. And I'm like, okay, dude, sure. I give him money and he'd run up there. And of course, he was always hitting on her. And yeah, he always struck out, but it was hysterical. Okay, so sorry, I got sidetracked there. So one evening, I decided that it was time to make enchiladas. And it wasn't the first time I had made enchiladas, but my enchiladas, thankfully, Keith was pretty gracious. He somehow had told other guys at the ET shop over at EMD that I made enchiladas, and somehow or another, a few of them ended up back at our apartment, just so happens on the night that I was making enchiladas. But whatever, okay, but it was still cool. I always thought the enchiladas were just okay. They weren't my mom's enchiladas, that's for sure. And I don't even remember if they were beef or chicken, but I'm pretty sure they were beef because that's kind of all I ever made at the time. Until I got a little bit older, I started branching out into chicken. Again, I don't know exactly how the word got out, but of course I'm sure it was Keith. Whatever. We always liked having company anyway, because it was always, the more the merrier. So made enchiladas, they seemed to go over pretty well, but the real star of the show was a bottle of Cuervo Gold Tequila. Sometime, I don't know, I am sure that we started drinking it maybe before dinner, but after we finished eating, whatever dude stayed, and we had like the small little eating kitchen, in a tiny little kitchen table. And I think it was myself, a guy named Bart, and he was from Montana, Keith, I think Tom, and then the real superstar of the show was a guy named Don. And of course, the only real drinking game that we knew was a game called Quarters. And for those of you who don't know, you basically just bounced a quarter into a shot glass in the middle of the table. If you made it, you could make someone else take a drink, which in this case was a shot of tequila. If you miss, well, after a few misses by everyone, Don decided to proclaim, if I don't make this, I'm going to do 5 shots of tequila. Well, of course, we just thought that was stupid. But of course, we decided to line up 5 shots of tequila. And honestly, I don't know why Don wanted to do that. He just might have been in just a mood. Besides, it was going to be super funny to see if he could actually do 5 shots. So, as luck would have it, or bad luck for Don missed. We could all tell that he was having second thoughts about doing these 5 shots. But Don, very true to his word, he lined up the shots in front of him and proceeded to slam them down. No sooner did he get down the 5th shot that he sprinted toward the kitchen sink and threw them right up. I can't tell you I can't tell you why, but holy shit, that was funny. And yeah, but he had like tequila and enchiladas all coming up in the kitchen sink. And it was gross, but it was still funny because stupid Coast Guard guys, or guys in general, would think that shit's funny. So Don cleaned himself up a little bit, came right back to the table and wanted to play some more. Of course, Don didn't learn anything from what had just happened, but he's like, okay, if I don't make this one, I'll do 6 shots of tequila. So I know what you're thinking. We should not let him do this. But, we were just, I'd like to say we were crazy, more like irresponsible. Yes, it was very irresponsible of us, but we let him do it. Yes. So you should keep in mind that we were all under 25, I think, at this time. So I don't know how responsible you all were when you were under 25, or even now. I don't know how old you are, but you get the idea. So We all took our turns, trying to do quarters and drop the thing in the shot glass. And of course, we all freaking missed. And then it was Don's turn. And you know what happened? He fucking missed. With the shots that we already had lined up, Don proceeded to shoot them down. Although this time, that dude looked like he was good. You know what? He looked like he had been eating a bunch of worms, all the faces that he was making. They were hysterical. I don't think he even got to the fifth shot, and his dumbass made a mad dash for the sink and proceeded to hurl up Tequila. It was hysterical. I mean, it was probably a good thing, too, that he was throwing all that stuff up, because I'm sure he might have gotten some version of alcohol poisoning or something. He was still drunk. Come to think of it, I think he had been drinking before he started playing quarters. After 2 successful attempts at trying to prove what a knucklehead he was, Don decided to call it a night. Or maybe we sent him home, or maybe his wife came and got him, because maybe, I don't remember. But he stumbled down the hall to his apartment, which is at the end of the hall, where his not drunk wife was waiting for him. I do remember she was pretty cool and not unaccustomed to Don or us making asses out of ourselves. And the best part of the night, at least to me, was because since I had cooked dinner, and Keith and I had this rule, if one person cooked dinner, the other one had to clean the kitchen. And in this particular case, that meant cleaning up Don's enchilada and tequila concoction that he had left in the sink.
You've been listening to Gonzo the Coast Guard Ears, written and produced by Tim Gonzalez, and I'm Nicholas Gonzalez, the voice guy. This episode was produced by Mislaid Productions.
Now, where did I put that thing?